Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for today's meetup. On today's agenda, Chris will be providing an overview of the new performance management solution and how to configure it. As a reminder, we'll be recording and posting this meetup on meetups.com. During this meetup, if you would like to make comments or chat with other participants, then feel free to use the chat panel. However, if you'd like to submit a question for the team to answer, then please submit it through the Q&A panel. With that said, I'll go ahead and pass it over to Chris.
Thanks, Heather, and thanks everyone for joining the call today. I think we have a really interesting solution to show you guys, something that we released earlier this year in June. We've gotten a lot of positive feedback about it, and so very interested to show everyone on the call and answer any questions that you might have as they come up. So in terms of performance management, I think we define it as the process of consistently reviewing performance data to inform decision making. And this framework or strategy, we're seeing it really emerging in communities across the country. And what it helps us to do or allows us to do is make more informed program and process improvements. So understanding the conditions in a community and what actions we want to take to improve those conditions, helping us to spend our scarce budget more and our resources more wisely, and ensure that the community's needs are being prioritized properly. So continuing to involve what things we're focusing on and what things we value highest for our community, and what actions we're taking to improve those conditions in the community. So the way we would kind of define this framework is through a set of strategic outcomes. And these strategic outcomes define the vision for the community. Each outcome defines aspects of life in the community that we want for all residents and visitors to experience. And it helps us prioritize the programs and policies implemented by the governing agency. So if you look at some examples on here at a high level, some of the vision or outcomes we might have could include having economic opportunities and resources for everyone in the community so that they can thrive, they can be successful, and they can enjoy life. We want everyone in the community to feel safe at home, at work, and when they're out in the community. So these are some of the outcomes that we might want for residents in our community. And then for each outcome, performance towards achievement is measured using metrics, and they're categorized as community indicators and their related community contributions. We may also think of these as conditions and the corresponding actions we take to improve those conditions. So community indicators measure things that are beyond the direct control of the governing agency, but they impact people in the community. And they indicate whether the quality of life is improving and whether we are making progress toward achieving the stated outcome. An example of a community indicator might be the unemployment rate. We can't directly control that in the community, but it does give us an indication of whether people are able to gain employment, whether they're able to purchase homes, feel secure in their livelihood, and support their family. Community contributions measure a government agency's contributions towards a strategic outcome. So these metrics likely involve data that is collected by the governing agency, and they illustrate whether the agency's programs and policies are positively moving the needle on one or more community indicators. So the corresponding contribution or action that we could take to support unemployment might be number of small businesses that we've supported in the past quarter. So it could be a program to help small businesses thrive. This could be through training, through education, or it could be through financial support. This could be an action that can help to reduce the unemployment rate in the community. So to help with performance management, Esri has built a solution that allows communities to accomplish these things. So it's a configuration of operations dashboard for ArcGIS, and it can be used by government agencies to monitor key performance metrics and communicate progress made on strategic outcomes to the general public and other interested stakeholders like the mayor, city council, and department leaders. These dashboards leverage authoritative data sources in the organization, both facts and feelings, and they can be easily configured for the strategic outcomes and performance metrics you have identified for your community. We worked closely with the City of Austin, their Office for Performance Management, to gather requirements when building the solution, and they provided a lot of great feedback during the development and future iterations or enhancements to these dashboards. As it matured, we've also more recently been engaging with King County in Washington, and they've provided us some great feedback that we're looking to enhance in future versions of the performance management solution. And I'll talk a little bit about some of those future enhancements later in the presentation. So with that, why don't we go ahead and jump into a demo of the solution, and then I also want to take you through how you can stand up the solution in your organization and then begin to configure it for the outcomes and the metrics that you want to measure. So first, I'm going to start on solutions.arcgis.com. This is where you can go to get the performance management solution, where you can learn more about it and try out some of the sample dashboards that I'm going to show to you today, so you can get a feel for how they work in the organization. So if you go to solutions.arcgis.com and go under ArcGIS for local government, you'll be able to search for the performance management solution and find all of this information. So what comes with the solution, we provide you a gallery of dashboards around 3 different strategic outcomes. So we have a community indicators and a community contributions dashboard for each of the following 3 strategic outcomes. We have economic opportunity affordability. This says that everyone should have economic opportunities and resources to enable the community to thrive. We have a health and environment strategic outcome, stating that everyone should enjoy a sustainable environment and a healthy life, both physically and mentally. And we have a public safety strategic outcome, stating that everyone should feel safe in their home, at work, and in the community. So these dashboards are inspirational examples, and they were developed using strategic outcomes that the City of Austin has defined. After you deploy the solution, you can configure and extend these dashboards for the strategic outcomes, contributions, and indicators you've identified for your community. So let's take a look at the economic and affordability community indicators dashboard. So when I click this in the gallery, it's going to pop me out to that dashboard. So each dashboard is going to have a similar look and feel. There's a map in the center showing us the selected geography, and it's surrounded by 8 panels. And each panel is composed of 3 stacked elements. So the current tab displays the most recent reported value for the given indicator. So here we have unemployment rate. We can see that the current rate of unemployment is 3% for the city of Naperville. I get at the bottom of this current tab an indicator of whether we are achieving or not achieving our target. So you can see that we have a green banner here with the check mark icon, indicating that we're achieving the target of being less than 3.1% unemployment. We also have the date of when this was last measured. So unemployment rate is something we typically get annually. So we received it for 2017. We have that number. Different metrics might be measured at different frequencies and at different time periods. So you can see below, graduation rate is based on the school year. So we got this information more recently in June. As we get new information, so after we end 2018, we should get new unemployment numbers, and the dashboard will reflect the latest value. I also, I want to highlight on here that we have a indicator where we're not meeting the target. So you can see on here we have the red banner indicating that for the city of Naperville, we wanted only 7% of the households to be spending greater than 50% of their income towards housing. Right now we can see we're at 7.6%. So this might be an area of focus for us to bring that number down, ensure that people aren't spending more than 50%, a large percentage of people not spending more than 50% on their income towards housing. We also have some metrics that we don't set a target for. Median home value is a good example of that. We don't necessarily know what is an appropriate target for median home value. And really, it kind of depends on whether you're buying or selling your house, whether you want the median home values to be high or low. But it is an important metric that we want to understand, and we want to see performance over time. So here we're indicating that we're just solely measuring this metric and we're watching it and we want to be aware of it, but we haven't set a target. You may also do this on new metrics that you don't necessarily know what is an appropriate target. Maybe for the first several years, you're just going to measure it. And then as you start to understand that target or that KPI a little bit more, you can then start to set targets for it. So we also have in each panel a history tab. When I click that, I can see the performance of that metric over time. I can see that the actual value of unemployment is shown here in these white bars. And then I have the green target line. So I can see how I was performing over time relative to that target. The other thing I can do in this dashboard, I don't have it shown here, but I could have future targets. So even though we don't have actual data for 2018, 2019, 2020, I could have that indicated on my graph and show what my target is for years in the future, giving us information about the goal that we're striving to. Maybe we have some programs or actions designed to bring that value down further, and we want to set aggressive targets in the future. I could represent that here in the dashboard. The final tab that I have is the Detail tab. And this allows me to provide additional context for the metric. For example, how is it measured? Where's the data coming from? And why is it important? I could also have information about different actions we're taking to improve this metric or programs that we're implementing in the future to help. This element supports rich text, so I could embed images, I could have hyperlinks to external resources. So it really gives you a lot of control on how you're describing the different KPIs that you're visualizing in the dashboard. I think what really separates this dashboard, though, from a lot of other things that you see from some of our competitors is the use of geography. So what I can do is, it's interesting to know how the community is performing as a whole, but let's say as a councilman, I want to see how my particular council district is performing. I can use this drop down to select a particular council district, and I can see the numbers update to reflect. You can see in District 1 that we're not meeting our unemployment goal. You can also see that the household income dropped below our goal. So they updated to reflect how that particular geography is performing. For residents in the community, they may be more interested in how their particular neighborhood is performing. So I can also include neighborhoods. And this would be a great example to have on your public site to allow people to have more of a sense of place and their particular neighborhood, comparing how their neighborhood is performing to the city as a whole. All of these geographies are customizable. It really depends on what geographies you want to measure and what geographies you have data for. But it's really customizable to the different audiences and users you might want to show these dashboards to. If we take a quick look, I want to show one more dashboard. Let's look at the public safety community indicator dashboard. So very similar look and feel, like I talked about. All the dashboards have the same orientation, map in the middle, 8 panels around the edge. But again, that's very customizable. I can drag these panels and move them around in different places in the UI. It's very flexible what you can do. So with public safety, we have some of those similar facts that you'll see in some of the similar performance sites. How many violent crimes were there per 1,000 people, property crimes. but we're also starting to include some of the sentiment in the community. So communities often do an annual survey, and they'll ask questions about how people feel about different aspects of life within the community. So in this example, Austin had some where they would ask, do you feel safe in the city? And people would respond at their level from 1 to 5, how safe they feel. And in this particular metric, we're indicating what percentage of the population gave a 4 or a 5 that they feel safe in the community. And this is an important thing to have in your performance management dashboard. It's not just measuring conditions or quantitative data. We want to understand the qualitative aspects as well. How do people feel about the community? How do they feel about the city's services? Do they trust the public safety services? Do they feel like their emergency calls were handled effectively and were responded to in an appropriate amount of time? So these are all things that we can include in the dashboards as well. So that's a brief overview of the performance management dashboards and their capabilities in the solution. I want to take some time to answer some questions now before I go into how you can deploy them in your organization and begin to configure them to your data and your metrics. So Heather, do we have any questions?
Yeah, we have a couple. So Darren has a question about the drop down there.
Yep.
Does the drop down have to be predefined areas, or can the user interact with the map?
Yeah, that's a great question. So right now, this is drawing from features in a layer. So these are features defined within the layer, and there's corresponding metrics for each. One of the enhancements we want to add moving forward that's not there yet is the ability to zoom in an area, click in the map, and have that set the location. So that's an enhancement we're looking at for a future release of the performance dashboard, but it's not quite there yet. Right now, the only capability is to select from the dropdown.
Okay. Tim had a question. Can you share how Austin and King County's key performance indicators were identified and developed?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think we were very impressed with where they were at in their state of development of their metrics. They had a pretty well established or understanding of the things that they felt important. They had a process for submitting those metrics. They went through council, and council ultimately approved the different outcomes and KPIs that they were going to measure and communicate to the public. So that was kind of their approach for designing and defining it. I think they started with a lot. They had conversations. They narrowed it down to what they felt was most important, and then they ultimately got council approval on them. So that was kind of their process. I know that there is continued conversations about, are we measuring the right things? Are the things that we think are changing outcomes in the public actually the things that we should be measuring? Those are questions that even Austin and King County still have, and they want to use the performance framework as a way to measure a lot of things and really start to narrow down what things are really that important and what things should we be monitoring. So that's what I would kind of describe was their process.
Okay. Tom has a question. Is it possible to have different targets by geography because one part of the city or jurisdiction may need different targets?
Yep. Yeah, so you can define different targets per geography, and you can define different targets per time period. So it's very flexible in that. And yeah, I think it was in another dashboard where it was just like, rather than percentages, it was numbers of businesses supported and things like that. Those types of things are going to be different targets for smaller areas than larger areas. So you can control all of that. It's driven by the data, and I'll show that in my next demo.
Okay. Brandon had a comment. He said you can set the layer actions to allow you to have different user-defined areas. Is that correct? Through the map options. And he also mentioned when selection change for choose layer set action. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so he's bringing up something that we had considered. In the map dashboard, I can configure the selection action that allows the user to click a select tool, select a feature, and that could be used to drive the widgets. The reason we didn't implement that, and certainly it could be up to every community to make that decision. For me, making this a public dashboard, it just wasn't super intuitive to non-GIS folks that if they click the select button and then draw a box and select a feature, that I just felt like that wasn't a great user experience for the general public. I could certainly see it used for internal dashboards where people are more capable of using it, but I really want to push to enhance the dashboard just to allow me to click without having to activate a tool and draw a box. Just click in the map or search for an address and intersect that address. Those are the things that I think would be more natural for the general public. So he's right that you could enable the select tool, and that could be one way to drive the filtering of the widgets.
Okay, great. That's all the questions for now.
Okay, cool. So now I want to go into, now that we've seen the dashboards and they look great and we want to stand them up in our community, how can we go about that? So where you're going to start is you're going to go back to the performance management solution on solutions.arcgis.com. I'm going to go into getting started, and the getting started is going to walk me through how I can install an add-in that we're going to use to deploy the solution, how I ultimately deploy the solution, load my data in, and configure the dashboards for my needs. So the first step is to install the solution deployment tool. If you've been to some of our previous meetups or you've worked with our solutions in the past, you're probably already familiar with this add-in. But this is an add-in for ArcGIS Pro that will launch a task in Pro, and it will walk you through the steps of how you can deploy a solution from solutions.arcgis.com to your organization. So if I go into Pro, I'm going to, after I've installed the add-in, on the Share tab, I'm going to have the ArcGIS Solutions button. When I click that, it's going to load a task into my project. The first step in the task is to sign into my ArcGIS organization. This is the ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise organization that you want to create the dashboards, web maps, and layers in. So once I've done that, the next step is to deploy an ArcGIS solution. And when I click that task, this is going to load a list of solutions grouped by industry that I can deploy to my organization. So under local government, we have a pretty long list. I'm just going to search for performance. So here's the performance management solution. We have it referenced both under the local government industry and the state government industry. What I would do next is I would select that item, pick a folder in my content, and hit deploy. And when I do that, it's going to create all the layers, maps, and dashboards in my org, blank and empty, a default starting point for me to then start to load my own data in and start configuring those dashboards. I already have deployed it. You can see by this green check mark that's already deployed in my organization. So to save time, I pre-deployed it. When I go into my content, what I'm going to see created in the folder that I selected is 6 dashboards, 1 community contributions dashboard, and 1 community indicator dashboard for the 3 different strategic outcomes: economic opportunity and affordability, health and environment, and public safety. I'm also going to have this minimal gallery app This is the app that I showed you before where I had the 6 dashboards all in a single app that I can click between and open the different dashboards. I have a web map that powers each of the dashboards. So each of the dashboards references the same web map. And I have 2 feature layers. I have a performance management feature layer, and I have a performance management dashboard view. I want to talk about these briefly so that you understand the difference between these 2 things. This performance management dashboard view is a feature layer view of the performance management feature layer. What this allows us to do is this dashboard view is referenced in the web map that's used by all of these dashboards. And we've made this a read-only view of the data. So when I share that view publicly, and I share all the dashboards publicly, users can see the data, but they can't edit the data. The source feature layer will have full editing permissions. So this would be the layer that I would share only within the organization to key stakeholders who might be contributing new performance management data to the layer. So that's how I can restrict who has access to edit the layer while still allowing the view to be publicly visible so that the entire community can access that information. Okay, so now that I've deployed that solution, the next step is to start loading in some of my data. And so to show that, I think it's helpful to take a look at the feature layer so we can get an understanding of what's included in it. So in the performance management feature layer, we have 2 sub-layers. We have a boundaries polygon layer, and then we have a metrics table. If we take a look at the data, right now it's going to be empty. So what's in the boundaries polygon layer, the only attributes that we have is the name of the boundary. That's the name that's going to show in that drop down in the dashboard. And the type of boundary. This could be city boundary, council district, neighborhood, any type you want, police district, fire district, any type of boundary type you can include in this polygon layer. And then the metrics table is related to that boundaries layer, and they're related using the boundary name. So this is where we're going to have the actual metric and the recorded value for that for each of the different KPIs. So we're going to have the boundary name, when the metric was reported, the name of the metric, the outcome that it's associated with, the actual value that was measured at that place and time, and the target at that place and time. So this is how you can manage having different targets for different geographies and how you're going to record different values at each of those different boundaries and times. Okay, so if we go back to our content, we take a look at, we can really edit any of these dashboards. I'm going to just go ahead and edit this community indicators dashboard. So right now it's going to load up and we're not going to have any data because it's referencing an empty feature layer. Note this kind of text, no data available at this location. That allows you, there will be times where you'll have KPIs that at the city level you have a measurement for, but maybe at the neighborhood level you don't have a measurement for. So the dashboard is smart and knows if the user selects a particular neighborhood, some of the KPIs might have metrics and some might report that there's no data available at that location. So that's how it handles if there's no information. So if I go back to Pro, I'm going to go ahead and start loading data. And to do this, we're going to be using the Append tool, the Append GP tool. In my file geodatabase, I have a boundaries feature class. So I'm going to select that feature class as an input. Actually, I might just drag it over there. And my target data set is going to be my boundaries feature layer. So I've actually added from the performance management feature layer in my org, I've added that boundaries polygon layer. So I want to load those into the feature layer in my organization. So I'll select boundaries. I can set up any data mapping. So if my local features don't have the same field name for name and type, I can set those up and map them to the corresponding field. Right now I have an exact map, so I'm just gonna run this. So the first step, I'm loading my geographies into the boundaries layer, my locations. And when that finishes, I should see the map refresh with those new features. And as you move along, you might start with just your city boundary. And as you get more data, you could add other boundaries as you get them. So you don't have to feel like you have to define everything. Some communities, a lot of communities we're seeing are just starting with the city or county boundary as a whole. And then they work and add smaller geographies as they get different metric data. Okay, so we got the geographies loaded in the feature layer. Now we want to work on the metrics. So this is a big question that I get is, my metrics or my KPIs are coming from lots of different data sources in my organization. How do I bring them together, or how do I load them in so that they can start to work with this dashboard? And one of the ways that I've found works pretty easy, especially given that some of this data is just annual data, or even quarterly data doesn't add an excessive amount of rows. Sometimes it's easier just to plug that data into a spreadsheet that we'll use to load into our feature layer. So if we focus on two metrics, unemployment rate and this jobs to population ratio, we have some historical data for the unemployment rate. So what I've done is I've put that information into a spreadsheet, and I've modeled it after the same schema of that metrics table in my org. So if we look, for example, let's just filter down to the city of Naperville. I have 5 rows for Naperville, 1 row for each year going back to 2013. I have the name of the metric, which is unemployment rate. The outcome it's associated with is the economy outcome. I have the actual value that was recorded for unemployment rate for Naperville, and then I have my target. If I wanted to, I could have future years here for unemployment rate, have no actual value, and just have targets. So that's how I would establish future targets. And as I realized or got the unemployment rate for those future dates, I could start to plug them into the actual, and the dashboard would update. So I've repeated this. I have this information, these 5 time periods for all of my council districts and all of my neighborhoods. I also have jobs to population ratio. So here's an example where I only have that metric for the city and the council districts. So if we just look at Naperville here, I have the value. I only have the actual target for the past year. I don't have any historical information. I've set up a future target, and I'm keeping those as placeholders. When I, at the end of this year, I'll have the value for this year, and then at the end of 2019, I can plug that in, and my dashboard will update to reflect that. So this is a potentially easy way to get started with seeding your dashboard with content, is using Excel to plug that information in for your different geographies and dates. So if I go back to Pro, what I'm going to do now is for my inputs, I'm going to go into my metrics spreadsheet. I'm going to grab the 2 sheets, jobs and unemployment rate. And then my target is going to be my metrics table in my feature layer in my org. You can see that 2 of the fields didn't match up because the names weren't exactly the same. So I'm going to map a source. So I'm going to pull the boundary name from both sheets and add them. And then report date, I'm going to grab the date reported and add those. So now I've mapped them, and I can hit run. So this is going to start to append some of that metric data. If I go back, let's go back to my content and take a look. Actually, I have the feature layer here. If I refresh this data, I should start to see some of that data coming in. I have my boundaries populated now. And if I go to my metrics table, I'm starting to load in some of that content. So for the different areas, different time periods, and the metric. Okay, so once we've loaded the data in, the next step is to start to configure the dashboards. So let's open this in a new tab and start to edit. So one of the things I'm going to see is unemployment rate is already being populated here. The reason it's working is because this widget, this indicator widget, has already been configured to work against a metric called unemployment rate. So I don't have to do anything with this, it will just work. So if you have unemployment rate as something that you're capturing, then you can just use this widget and use it as is. But I don't have a widget configured for the jobs to population ratio metric. So what I'm going to do is configure this widget. The first step is to set the filter. So I want to filter based on this jobs to population ratio metric. And once I do that, the numbers come in. So I didn't have to do much to get that working. I just had to select the metric from my metrics table that I want to drive this widget. Now let's go into some of the further kind of configuring of this widget. One thing I might want to do is maybe this value isn't a percentage. I want to get rid of the percent sign. In this case, it is a percentage, so I'll leave it. I might want to change this icon that shows next to it. So I don't know, maybe we find this worker guy. He can be equivalent to jobs. I need to change it for both my representation of when we're meeting our target and when we're not meeting our target. So I'm going to change that as well. And then I'm going to change the title. So instead of graduation rate, let me grab this jobs to population ratio, paste that in there. Also change this one. And now it's jobs to population ratio. The banners that are driving whether we're meeting the target or not meeting the target are driven by the description at the bottom of the widget. And these descriptions are using custom HTML to give us this nice green banner with the icon and the target and the date. If you need to customize these, or for example, let's say you have a scenario where a value being above the target is good versus a value being below the target is good, you might need to switch which representation is green and which one is red. Or you might want to use the blue banner that's just indicating you're measuring it, but you don't have a target. If you need to do those things in the configure dashboard topic, I've included all the things I've talked about today in this help. And at the bottom or near the middle here is the different HTML that you can paste into that description. So I have a representation if you're meeting the target, not meeting the target, or has no metric, so or no target. So if I select and copy this HTML and then go back to my dashboard, edit the source, copy paste, now I have the blue banner representation. So all of that HTML that you need is available in the help documentation for it. So I'm going to grab the green banner representation back, paste it in, fix it. So now we have the green. Okay, so when I hit done, now I have this updated for jobs to population ratio. If I go to the history, I need to make some updates to this as well. So I'm going to do a similar thing. I'm going to select the metric name that I want to use. And then I'm going to go into my title. Rather than typing it, I'll just copy paste, copy it in there. And that's all I need to do. So I've updated my graph. You can see I have a 2017 actual value. I have future targets. And as I get new information, the graph will update. The final thing is to update my detail. And in here, again, I can do a similar thing where I'm updating this. I've also pre-typed up some text that I'm just going to paste in here. So you can do some formatting. This is just an HTML editor. So I can do things like if I want to bold different sections, I just have this rich text editor. I can insert images. I can insert hyperlinks. I have a lot of control over what goes into this detail section. And now I've configured the current tab, the history, and the detail for a new metric that I'm measuring in my community. So that I would repeat this process for the different KPIs that I want on my dashboard. And I could save that dashboard out however I want. And now I can make it available for the community. So that's an overview of how you can take and deploy the dashboards into your organization. Using your own data, begin to load that into the layers that are provided with the solution, and then configure the dashboards and the widgets for the different KPIs that you're measuring. So with that, I think I'll open it up for some more questions before we take a sneak peek at some of the stuff we're working on in the future.
Sure. Tom has a question. What is the best way to duplicate the dashboards within the org?
So I can come in here and at the top, I can save it as. I can do a save as and create, another copy of the dashboard. So this is a nice way to just kind of create multiple copies. And because each dashboard is essentially the same template, you could just use one of them and save them off as the different dashboards as you're editing them. So I think that would be the best way to do that.
Okay. Laura has a question. How does Append work when you need to load the same layer again, but with changes such as you move a boundary or add a boundary area to your city?
Yeah, so so the question was how does Append work if you just need to make updates or changes to existing features? I think it would be good to get in contact to talk a little bit more about that. Append is always just going to push new records in, but in some ways you could see potentially truncating or deleting from the original layer and pushing up the new changes. That could be a process that could work depending on the types of changes that you might need to make. And there's also new tools in online that allow you to just update records in place using a unique ID on the feature. So if your boundaries have a global ID or a unique identifier that you can use some tools in ArcGIS Online and Enterprise now to append or upload data and just replace or just update the things that have changed.
Okay. Tim's question is, does the performance management, solution consume credits?
The performance management solution, the only credits that are being consumed in the default deployment is the credits to store the hosted feature layers in your org. So if you're using enterprise services, then it wouldn't. If you lay down the default deployment and you're hosting the layers in online, then it will use credits to host the feature layers, but there aren't any other credits used to do that. The only other thing I would add is when I was building some of the sample data, I used a lot of our Esri enrichment tools to get data from the American Community Survey for things like unemployment rate, median household income, median home value. So to use those enrichment tools to enrich your own geographies with that data, that consumed credit, but that is not required to stand up the performance management solution.
Okay. Laura has another question. How do you handle extremely large Excel data sheets with over 100,000 plus entries?
It's a good question. I mean, I haven't tried it myself. I would, just would take longer to append it into the layer, but I can't anticipate why it would be problematic to push that data into the feature layer.
Okay. Tim's question is, what if you only have 3 or 4 KPIs? Any
Yep.
suggestions?
So, I mean, there's nothing to prevent me from just getting rid of these elements, deleting them out, and I could get down to 4 stacks. So if I delete, this one out, now I only have 7, and then I can drag these different stacks around. So if I want them in different positions, I have all of that control. So you could have a map on the top and 4 across the bottom. You have a lot of flexibility on how you're orienting things in the dashboard. We laid down this default template with 8 around the side and the map in the middle, but you can do whatever you want in terms of positioning these things in different spots. So if I want the map on the side and then the indicators on the right-hand side, I can do that. So there's a lot of flexibility.
Okay. Sean's question is, can you populate the maps with your own maps and feature services instead of hosting on ArcGIS Online?
Yeah, you definitely can. We're just leveraging operations dashboard, and we're leveraging maps and services. So dashboard works with enterprise services. So you could have your own ArcGIS server services that you're referencing in the web map, and you can consume them in the dashboard. We lay down hosted feature layers to make it easy if you want something to just get started, but you can replicate the same thing using your own services to host the data.
Darian's question, are the colors of the overall dashboards configurable, like moving the metric boxes?
So in terms of the colors, like the color scheme, so I can configure that here. I'm using the dark theme, but I can change it to the light theme. I can also change, what I want the default text color to be for the different things. I can change what I want the element background color to be. This is probably going to look really ugly, but you do have a lot of flexibility in how you're coloring things. And I'll show in my sneak peek of a future implementation, I'll show you how I've changed kind of the colors in the dashboard.
Okay, that's all the questions for now.
Cool. Okay, so let me go back to my slides. So we answered some questions there. So let's take a look at the road ahead. So later this year, we're going to be releasing a new initiative template for performance management. So from ArcGIS Hub, you'll be able to adopt an initiative, and this will, similar to the deployment tool, it will create the dashboard, maps, and layers we showed earlier. But it's also going to create a website that you can use to educate the public on the strategic outcomes and set context for the community and really describe whether the community is making progress towards achieving the stated outcome. The performance dashboards will be embedded within the site, and it provides a nice experience for residents to see how the community and their neighborhood is performing. This initiative will also make it easy for you to share your performance data in your open data portal with the community. To complement that, we also want to build a community sentiment survey. So as we showed in the performance dashboards, understanding how residents feel about the quality of life within the community is also critical in any performance management program. So we want to provide a survey that can be linked from that site that allows residents the opportunity to provide their feedback on the community's strategic outcomes, the KPIs that are being measured, and if the programs and policies the community is implementing is improving those conditions. The community can then use these survey responses in their performance management program to gauge if sentiment in the community is improving over time. And finally, work that we've just recently begun around equity and social justice. So we'd like to add an equity lens to the performance management solution. So this will allow us to use geography and time to not only understand how the community is performing overall, but also if conditions and the distribution of services are equitable across the community. So we saw some of that, how we could select different geographies, but we really want to highlight how we can find the areas within the community that are falling behind. And we also want to add some analytical tools that can help us answer whether our policies and programs are resulting in more equitable conditions. So we've just started work on this area in collaboration with King County, Washington. If this is an area of interest for you and your organization, we'd love to hear from you. You can send us a message through the Meetup site, and I'll be in contact to discuss further. So with that, let's take a sneak peek at the hub site that we're working on as part of that initiative delivery. So if I go to my browser, so here's the performance management hub site. This is where your community could add your presence to your website, kind of highlighting your performance management program and the different outcomes that you're prioritizing for your community. So what it allows you to do is kind of brand it, add your own logo, background, things like that, but ultimately highlight the different outcomes that we're prioritizing. So you can see some of the things that we've talked about: economic opportunity, affordability, public safety, mobility. Those are common outcomes or visions that a community might have. We have links to the performance management data, so to our open data site, so we can get access to the raw data. We have an opportunity for residents to share their feedback about how we're doing, whether we're prioritizing the right things, and how we could improve. We have a section for frequently asked questions. So if people have questions about the dashboard, where the data is coming from, why we're using it, or why this is important, I can include that in this section. Oftentimes you'll have participating agencies. So whether you're a county who's working with other local municipalities, or you are working with private organizations who are impacting the quality of life within the community and are a partner with you, it might be good to highlight those agencies and allow them to link out and learn more information about them. We have an events calendar. So if you have any events associated with this initiative that you want to highlight to the public to allow them to join, you can configure that and add your events. But I think the real powerful thing about this site is exploring the dashboards. So let's say I'm interested in how my community is performing for public safety. This is essentially the same dashboard embedded in the site, but we've kind of reconfigured it slightly to make it work better in an embedded page. So we've taken away the map and we've stacked the 8 widgets on top of each other to really kind of take up less screen real estate. I've also branded it slightly different. So I'm using a bluish gray color instead of the black color. I've updated some of the banner greens and reds to stand out better on that background. I still have the history and the detail embedded here. And I can still explore by different geographies. So I've also configured this dashboard to just show me the city and the neighborhoods. So I can still explore that. I can also, at the top, click to my different outcomes, and we're just loading up a different page with a different embedded dashboard, and I can explore that data. So this is an example of a hub initiative that we're going to put out. It's also going to be an inspirational example for communities of how they can embed the performance management dashboard in their own sites and create a nice experience for citizens or residents who are coming across this page. So I'm pretty happy with the way this came out. I think it's quite powerful with what you can do with the performance management dashboard. So I think that's all I had for the presentation and the sneak peek that I wanted to give you. So I'll open it up one last time for questions.
Sure. Tom has a question. Is there any costs for the hub initiative?
So hub is a product that you purchase, and with Hub you get the initiatives as part of it. So once you've purchased ArcGIS Hub, you'll have access to all the initiatives that are there, including the performance management initiative that we're putting out. This page is a site. I can create sites through open data. So I could create this same thing through open data. So that's another example of open data is something you get with ArcGIS Online and you already have access to it. But if you want access to the initiative and the already configured site and embedded dashboards that come with it, that's a product that you purchase.
Okay. Is there a tentative date for this new hub?
Initiative?
Oh, yeah.
We're targeting hopefully by December, we'll have the initiative out and available in Hub.
Okay. Tom's other question is, will we be able to embed this site without using the hub initiative?
You will, so I'll answer it this way. This dashboard is embedded in an iframe in a website. So there's nothing to prevent you from if you currently have a website, from adding an iframe to that site and referencing the URL to the dashboard. I did some things to configure the dashboard slightly so that it would work better in terms of being in the iframe by getting rid of the map and stacking the widgets on top of each other. But you could replicate this entire thing in your own website. There's nothing preventing you from doing that.
Okay. Another question is there a document on how to pull the source data from American Survey by data enrichment tool and ArcGIS Online so it can be used in the metric table? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I don't have that specifically documented yet, how that translation from what you get out of the American Community Survey, how that gets directly into the metrics table. What you'll ultimately get, the way the enrichment tool would work, is you'd pass in your geographies. That would be like your city boundary, your neighborhood. You would pass it into the tool. You would select the different metrics that you want to enrich, like unemployment, median home value, and you're going to get out polygons, the same polygons with additional fields on them for unemployment, median home value, household income. You should be able to then, because you have the name of the boundary on the data and you have those metrics, you should be able to translate that by exporting that out to another table or something like that. That's just grabbing the value for unemployment and the name of the boundary, and then you can upload that into the layer. But I think that your feedback is good. I should write a document in the help that specifically describes how to enrich a layer and get that into the dashboard.
Okay, and I think this is going to be our last question for today. Is the performance management solution has a responsive design?
So it doesn't have a responsive design. We're leveraging Operations Dashboard, and Operations Dashboard does not currently have a responsive design. It's something that the team is working on and thinking about, but it's not there yet. But what I can do is I could optimize the dashboard so that it would look better on mobile devices. And I've experimented with some examples like that by limiting the number of KPIs that we show, or potentially even having dashboards where there's only a single KPI and we're embedding different dashboards for each KPI, which performs better when viewed on a mobile device. So if I were to look at this right now, this is a fun demo. So if I come in here and now I'm on my mobile device, you can see that the dashboard, everything is slammed together, and it kind of just shrinks to the space that it has. But if I had configured this so that it was just showing one or two widgets or one or two indicators, it would perform better on the mobile device. So unfortunately, it doesn't have a responsive design at this point.
Okay. One comment I think from Tom, these metrics are better understood because of the added greater and less symbols. I don't know if that's just a comment on the dashboard itself.
Yeah, so relative to the target, I'm guessing. I
Yeah.
know with the default version that gets laid down in your org, I don't add the greater than or less than by default because it kind of depends on the different scenario or the different KPI, but you can configure it to add those symbols as you're customizing it.
Okay. Perfect. That is it, I think, for questions. So I'll go ahead and wrap it up. So thanks everybody for joining us for today's meetup. We look forward to seeing and hearing from you at our next meetup, which will be on Thursday, November 15th, where we'll be giving you a sneak peek of what we've been working on and also highlight some of the plans for state and local government solutions in the first half of 2019. So until then, have a great afternoon, everybody.
Thank you.